Welcome back to Pop Dissected. Today, we're going to be talking about Justin Bieber's 6th studio album, Justice, which was released on March 19th of this year. More specifically, we're going to be diving into conflated and contradictory ideas surrounding this album. Now, before anyone brings out their pitchforks, this video is not a review by any means, but we're going to be focusing on the intention of the record that generally is coming across as misguided and slightly confusing. However, we must give credit where credit is due. Justice by no means is a failure of a record, nor is it even a bad one. It's a pop album, and it's crafted very well for its performance. And Justin delivers solid vocals across several very well-written tracks. I don't want to discredit any work or effort put into this album, so let's get into it so I can explain why Justice seems to be a perplexing move, even after following his last effort, Changes. But before we begin, I'd love for you to join my community of channel members, where you can receive special perks, exclusive badges, emojis, early access to videos, and my Pop Dissected podcast. I post 2 podcasts every weekend that range in a variety of topics. I hope to see you join. Also, be sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell for more future content on all your favorite pop stars. So taking it back a bit, Changes released February 14th of 2020, and it marked a stark shift and arguable decline when it came to Justin's work. After the massive success brought on by Purpose in 2015, we can say the 5-year gap is the main attributing factor to this. However, Changes pales in comparison to Purpose for a multitude of reasons. Though earning 2 Grammy nominations in this year's ceremony, the album was noted to lack a pretty big component: diversity. For this album, Justin leaned a lot more into R&B with his sound. However, it didn't come across as anything experimental. Far from it, in fact. In brief summation, critics found the album to be one note, with recycled themes, production, an assortment of seemingly random collaborations and features, all which did not exemplify any sort of, change. This album, as well as Justice, really boil down to being love letters and odes to his wife, Hailey Bieber. And while the sentiment is nice, too many things overshadow his efforts to be genuine with his music. When it came to his campaign for Changes, Justin attempted to persuade listeners to help a post reach 20 million likes on Instagram, and if it did, he dropped the album before Christmas of 2019. This did not happen. Then we have the overly zealous effort to make the lead single Yummy reach number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. It did not. Now, as I've stated before, there's nothing wrong with fans or an artist wanting their songs to do well, or showing appreciation for when they do. However, the extreme push rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. The track itself was blasted across numerous critical reviews, perceiving the song as a very poor attempt to earn as much notoriety as possible. That aside, Changes reached number 1 on the Billboard 200, with 231,000 album equivalent units, 126,000 being pure sales. Justin would break the record for having the most solo number 1 albums at his age, being 7, a record which he'd break again with Justice. Many assumed Justin's efforts to promote his music were out of desperation, clout, or what have you. Plain and simple, it rubbed people the wrong way, which is a preface on why Justice seems to be a total 180 that doesn't work. In describing the album, Justin, as many artists have done recently, wanted to release music that would be able to bring healing to those who listen and serve as a source of unity and inspiration. I think this is a bit confusing, however. Many artists who wanted to push out music for this reason in the past year primarily did it when the lockdowns began occurring, and times were a lot more uncertain than they are now. So, does it matter if Justin is late to the game? Not necessarily. I do believe artists can use music to heal, and I do think this was in part Justin's honest intention with Justice. Many artists have released albums amidst the last year, some in isolation, others that have been delayed. But after an effort that didn't really hit the mark and a pushy campaign, another album so soon, with a promised message about creating connection, seems contradictory to say the least. For this album, Justin would return to full-fledged pop music. And as I said, it's a well-crafted pop album, no doubts about it. I'm curious though, if Changes wasn't all that well received, primarily in part due to its production, is Justin just going back to basics? Well, yeah, and I don't think that would be far off. And I do believe it's a smart move to return to a sound or style that you know is effective for you as an artist and can sell. At the end of the day, music is an industry. However, that's another point I'd like to continue. Though being seen as his strongest effort since Purpose, Chance the Rapper, who is featured on Justice, compared it to Off the Wall by Michael Jackson. Now, I've recently discussed Michael's impact in the industry, specifically Off the Wall itself, which you can watch here or check out the description for. Knowing how Off the Wall quite literally birthed modern pop music, among many other things, is Justice even comparable to that? Not really, no. I think the comparison is very out of touch, to be honest, and Justice does not reflect any sort of monumental shift in pop music or the direction of the music industry. I will say though, Justin Bieber is the leading male when it comes to pop music. I've recently discussed how Dua Lipa appears to be our leading lady also. So with that in mind, I can understand the comparison to Michael Jackson, sort of. Justin Bieber has been leading the pop game for guys, which is why his music is always so successful and why he always can stand out. Pop for women is crowded, and while there are many iconic queens, the handful of leaders in the genre shift constantly. On top of these misguided comparisons to Michael Jackson, we also have the voice of late civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. interlaced within the album Justice. This, for a lot of people, is also very confusing. Your collaborator compares you to Michael Jackson, who actively fought against racial inequality throughout his entire career. You claim your album is about providing comfort and healing, and you weave in speeches from Martin Luther King Jr. on an album that's entitled Justice. Do we understand why this effort seems to be entirely confusing and contradictory? I think this point only extends once you get into the actual content of the album itself. Justice is largely full of, similar to Changes, tracks that in one way or another serve as being an ode to his wife. And some have interpreted these tracks lyrically as being one and the same with a different coat of paint. Then you have songs such as Peaches that are fun, but seem to miss the mark of the album's intended purpose, perhaps. So in short, what is missing with Justin Bieber's Justice? And why does this album not seem to work? Now, the content may be a factor, but I think there are other things that are more important to focus on. First off, the title of the album. As of now, it isn't explicitly explained how anything on this album is reflecting the motif of justice, aside from shoehorned in audio from Martin Luther King Jr. The inclusions of his speeches are tone deaf. These are powerful words from MLK that seem to be thrown in for one reason or another, without giving any sense of relation to the album itself. Do these speeches back up the album's title and Justin's explanation for the album's creation? Perhaps. But I think it just comes across as so shallow, the connection just can't be made. Now, this is specifically speaking within the body of work. Justin has addressed the inclusion of these speeches and has sent out tweets to spread awareness for a multitude of causes. With that, we can understand he does care and he is trying to educate himself as well as others, but solely within the context and content of the album, it does not make much sense. In a year, Justin went from mediocre R&B tunes and trying to leverage as much success as he could, to now suddenly wanting to heal the world with an album full of songs generally about his wife. I think the biggest glaring issue is it doesn't seem honest or authentic. That said, Justice has a handful of self-referential tracks chronicling Justin's own struggles, such as Lonely and Unstable. Given that, the album seems to be pulling itself in a variety of directions that do not unify Justin's apparent intent or message that he wanted to put out. But let me ask, is this album really reflecting any sort of justice and serving the same hope other artists have wanted to put out with their music in the last year? Is this a bait and switch to capitalize on present times and notoriety? Let me know in the comments. All above said, I don't believe Justin Bieber is a bad artist. He's far from it. He rose to fame at a very young age, and many stars struggle when that happens to them, such as Miley Cyrus or Demi Lovato. And I don't want anyone to think I'm trying to discredit the work of Justin, his label, or his producers. But so many things just do not seem to add up to me. I would love to hear additional perspectives. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I'd like to shout out my Pop Icon Status channel members: Carl Dillinson, Matthew Quigley, Gerard Lang, Daniel Barron, Jalen Heater, and Tyler Salvetti. I hope those watching decide to become channel members as well. And don't forget to drop a like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell for more future content on all your favorite pop stars.